Redditors who work at remote places like forest officers, oil rig workers, etc., what creepy things have you noticed while at work? I worked at a public forest. One day we had someone report a dead animal on the side of one of our trails. A few of us from the front desk hiked out to see what it was. It looked like a giant piece of liver, maybe. Just a pile of smooth red meat, no blood around. And it was wrapped up in a t-shirt, with some coins scattered around it. We called our rangers to go check it out, and one of them was pretty sure it was a placenta. The weird part is, you have to check in through a front desk. So someone either snuck a placenta/liver in or gave live birth/removed an organ on our trails. We never got an answer on what the pile of meat was, how it got there, or why. I work on North Sea oil rigs on an ad hoc basis, off the coast of Scotland. Wouldn't say anything was particularly paranormal creepy, but it can be very unsettling/weird place. Fog can come rolling in out of nowhere, and other rigs you can see off the sides can disappear in front of your eyes. Sometimes you can't see the walkways 6 feet in front of you, or if you're walking over grading you can't see the sea below your feet, about 60 m down from feck to sea, but you can hear it, albeit muffled. The fog can roll in over the course of a few minutes too, so a perfectly clear day becomes pea soup. You can also feel the rig moving/swaying on high winds/rough seas. Even though it's a fixed leg platform. Very unnerving to feel your office swaying when it shouldn't be. My last trip was my first ever night shift, and I found it particularly unsettling as you've got the background noise of the plant, but I walked around the whole rig without seeing another living soul for the whole shift. Usually there are about 130 people on board, although smaller rigs have smaller head counts. Usually once a trip I'm hit by this awareness that you are just very isolated and in the middle of nowhere. Most rigs I've worked on are an hour's chopper ride from land. So if things go wrong it can escalate very quickly. I do a lot of stream work, so I spend time out in pretty rural areas walking streams and rivers. Once my co-worker and I were working in a more urban environment and came across what we initially thought was a body, which of course triggered "oh shit" from us, but it ended up being a firefighter's dummy that had fallen down a hill. We felt pretty dumb. Other notable things include a small grave in the middle of nowhere for someone's dog, pretty sad, and a stuffed rabbit with shotgun shells placed where its eyes should be, a mannequin very purposely placed in a chair in the middle of the woods, and lots of little random altars. I also did work in Myrtle Beach, what a hellhole, and accidentally walked into an inhabited homeless camp. I was peering into a stormwater grate when I looked up and saw a homeless person standing in his shelter staring at us and saying nothing. I felt like I was trespassing, so we quietly left. Used to be a supervisor for a janitorial company, and a couple times a week I had to go to a middle school and clean their hallway floors and gymnasium with a Zamboni type vehicle that mopped and scrubbed the floor. When I was there I had the whole school to myself. Used to get finished quickly and go to the library and read while eating my dinner. Well, one morning after being there, I get a call from school security and they want me to come in. When I get there I see a police car too. Uh-oh, I think. They ask me a few questions like, did you notice anything out of the ordinary or strange while you were here last night? No, I hadn't, usually have headphones in. Security then shows me camera footage of someone breaking into one of the classrooms while I was riding the Zamboni not far away. I was there for another 2 hours. Nothing was stolen. But the worst part was they didn't have footage of the person leaving, they didn't go out the way they came in, and police had to sweep the entire school. Never did find out what happened with that one. When I was 15 years old, I was doing my 4 a.m. newspaper delivery round on bicycle. I was driving into the garden of this one subscriber where I saw 2 guys with flashlights looking through the windows of the house. I was a bit in shock and just said, "Good morning, guys." They were just as much in shock, and an awkward silence followed. I tried to break the silence by asking if I could pass them to deliver the newspaper through the door. One of the guys said the person living in that house did something to his family and they took it as an opportunity to get away in their car that was still running. When they were gone, I rang the doorbell at the house to tell them what happened and they should keep an eye out. We were wrapping up for the day in northern Canada. I am fueling up the side boom. I'm all by myself at this point cause I was tired of listening to the laborers whine of the cold, so I told em I would take care of the rest. Think bulldozer with no blade but a giant metal boom on the side that we use to razor and lower pipe. It's February, so pitch black. I keep hearing some weird sound. I can't quite hear it cause the pump is too loud. I search around a couple times and see nothing. I get in the truck and take off, drive past the front of the side boom to see a cougar sitting on top of a dirt pile 15 feet away. The damn thing was just watching me there and probably could have ended me without me even realizing it. I've never seen a cougar in the wild before and it's hard to understand just how big they are and how powerful until you see one up close. That thing leaped off the 6 feet pile and probably didn't touch ground for 15 to 20 feet. It's terrifying to think something so big and powerful could just be sitting there deciding if they want to make you dinner. My mom used to live in a small town in the Cascade Mountains and worked as a forest ranger. The creepiest thing that happened was when the oldest male ranger kept hitting on her and trying to get her to come home with him. Not very out of the ordinary, but many years later after she'd left the town she found out he had been convicted of manslaughter and had killed a young female ranger right before she got hired. She would have probably been his next target. I'm not sure this counts, but I'm a teacher at an urban public school and was at work late grading and getting ready for the next day. Time had kind of flown by and before I knew it, it was 7 p.m. I start packing up to leave in a building that is, in theory, locked and empty besides me, when our Alice alarm goes off, indicating an armed intruder in the building. I am 1. Alone 2. Young 3. Freaked AF because I am absolutely not ready to fight a gunman over my lesson plans. I book it out of the school and dive into my car, hearing the alarm blaring the entire time. I peel out the parking lot, and can see in my rear view the alarm lights still flashing and debate never going back, cause fuck that LMAO. Turns out they were doing routine maintenance and didn't send out an email to the teacher's woman face-palming light skin tone. Some friends and I were fishing a small pond just after dark for catfish. We started to hear sounds coming off the water like someone throwing softball-sized rocks, but they were coming from all over the pond. We thought someone was messing with us and we called out a few times for them to stop, but we eventually got freaked out and left. Cut to a few years later, I'm fishing a different pond and hear the same sound. Turns out it was a beaver slapping its tail on the water to drive me from its territory. When beavers become problems in rivers, they relocate them to ponds in town. On our drill ship that was built in China, we noticed on the drawings there was a room. We went to look at it and couldn't find an entrance, but the spacing was obvious there was an extra room. It might not sound so creepy unless you've been in these shipyards where two things are known to happen: stowaways, although I doubt it in this case, but also hundreds of workers at any given time following orders blindly. So we confirmed that the room had all 6 sides, yet not a single weld on the outside. There is only one way this could have happened, and I'm sure you're starting to get it now. They must have welded from the inside for this room and then realized they had no way out upon completion if the gases didn't kill them first. It's extremely heavy around that room. People say they hear things. I have definitely. This isn't some old ship either. I rode this ship from China to Amsterdam after completion and then the maiden voyage to America. I guess it happens quick. I've been fishing out in the Gulf of Mexico where they have some oil rigs. This rig wasn't being used, from what we knew, so we would get pretty close to it to fish for red snapper. While we were out there, we could have sworn we heard screams of a woman over and over. It was some shit, but the explanation was the wind making the noises as it blew through the rig. Well, that's what we were told, but it totally creeped us the fuck out. I work as a polar bear guard. As in, I escort people across tundra and mountains and protect them from polar bears. I once saw a snowman totem with reindeer antlers coming out of his head. It was deformed, full of bullet holes and rather creepy. Spent a summer in Wyoming going to BLM land and other remote locations collecting data on bats and herpetofauna. Heard a lot of weird noises like mountain lions screaming, deer snorting, what sounded like owls fighting. Woke up one morning to find 2 bull moose sleeping 20 yards behind my tent. All of this was part of the job until one night a truck was driving towards us when we were on a BLM square in the southwestern part of the state. The truck was going overland, no road, and was slowly driving at us. It stopped about 100 yards away, turned off the lights, and we could see a person get out. They walked a full circle around us at 100 yards away, got back in the truck and turned around. This was after dark and this shadowy figure did a complete circle around us. You could hear them walking through the sagebrush, and I'm sure they could hear us talking. We packed up after that and drove to a hotel an hour away. I called the office and told them I was taking a gun when we went back out. Didn't like having the bear mace as our only defense. Edit: BLM stands for Bureau of Land Management. I used to work in the Gulf of Mexico on oil rigs for years, and it may not exactly be creepy, but I found it really unsettling. In deep, open water, the water itself is really clear, so everyone can plainly see all the tuna and barracudas hanging around the rig waiting for the onboard cook to throw off whatever food waste he needs to. Every once in a while a huge great white shark would swim up from underneath and snatch a tuna, and it really took like less than a second. They're really scary. My oldest brother used to work the overnight sprinklers on a golf course. He took me out one time just for fun, and as we were driving uphill on a fairway, a figure of a lady appeared in the headlights at the top of the hill. My brother steered a little to the left of her and kept driving right on by. I stared right into her eyes as we drove by, and she stared back. Her eyes glowed like a cat in the night. As soon as we were out of voice range, I asked my brother what the hell was that. He calmly responded, "Yeah, she lives on the golf course and likes to terrorize the workers from time to time. I usually see her out here once a week." Alright. Cool. Cool. My parents live pretty far back in the country and have one neighboring house. The neighbors would let their basset hound outside for about 10 minutes to use the bathroom every morning. One morning they let him out, and he didn't come back inside. After a couple minutes they walked out to his favorite bathroom spot, and found his head. Judging from the tracks, a mountain lion had ambushed him and apparently torn his head off before carrying the body away. What I thought was the creepiest part was that the family hadn't heard a sound. *Edit, fix spelling of basset. I've worked in Canada's north for a few years now in oil and gas. It's pretty creepy when during night shift you realize a moose has just been standing at the tree line staring you down for an unknown length of time. Or finding bear tracks crossing the tracks you just made 5 minutes ago. Honestly, the silence of a snowy forest in the dead of night 100s of km away from anything is pretty spooky. When your only contact to the outside world is a radio channel nobody's listening to, you feel pretty alone. Working on ships. There was one night I was on a ship sailing through Alaskan waters. And it happened to be my first night ever seeing northern lights. I can't believe how awesome that was. It made the sky clear, made the night look like it was dusk, we were able to see clearly for miles. Few buddies and I hit the roof, or what we call Lido deck, at 1 a.m. just to gaze at it. An hour or so in, there was 6 of us on top, nearly the entire crew now. A big white spotlight shines at us. We were near land, but where the spotlight was above the water, and it wasn't low enough to be on a ship, this was very high up. It shined on us for about 15 to 20 seconds. Once the light turned off, we looked to see what it was. Saw nothing, no trace of an aircraft or anything. Couple minutes go by and the same light shined on us, this time it was on the other side of our vessel, above mountains. Still, unable to see what it was. We all saw it, we all have never seen any aircrafts hovering above these waters, especially at 2 a.m. We don't know what it was. We think it might have been some sort of silenced aircraft. The military was probably doing drills or something. But anyways, that was one of the weirder things to happen out on the ocean. I worked for a medical examiner and used to be on the graveyard shift alone. The first night I was on at midnight on the dot, our air system shut off, which caused the vents to warp. That shit sounded like somebody running through the vents in the ceiling on all fours. Thankfully I got used to it, lol, but def creepy at first. Another night we lost power and stupid me watching a horror movie, working so hard almost shit my pants when everything went dark, and knowing that a room with around 30 dead bodies in it was walking distance away. That one I stayed in my car for. Not to mention the constant long dark red lit hallways. Glad I'm not on overnight now. Edit, thanks for the silver, kind stranger. My first silver on Reddit. It only took 5 years and lots of lurking. Look at me now, mom. I work on large ships. If you get a clear view of a hull or passage that runs the whole length, you can actually see the whole ship warp and twist with the sea. If the passage isn't very well lit, it can look like a scene from a horror movie. We have a PTO pump spot that comes out of a canal for our rice fields. When I was like 12 years old, my uncle found 2 bodies dumped in the little sump area where our pump sat. Both of the ladies that were dumped there had the same tattoos, so they think it was gang related, but it was 45 minutes away from where that gang operated. I still look in the hole every time I go by there, and that was 20 years ago. Used to teach outdoor education, which was essentially just summer camp during the school year, and school groups would come up and spend a few days at the camp. On their last night we would always tell them a scary story around the campfire. It was the same scary story every time. We worked in partners, so there were always 2 staff members for every school group. One staff member would tell the story and the other staff member would go hide in the forest and make scary noises. So, I'm telling the story, and every few minutes there's like a snap of a twig or rustling in the bushes, and of course, as always, the kids all get freaked out and they start getting scared. It's very fun. Well, as I'm telling a story, I'm walking around the campfire looking at all the kids' faces, and I noticed a familiar one. My partner Eric. Sitting there smiling at me, wondering why I'm staring at him. My heart has never started beating so fast in my life. Eventually I sped through the story and all the kids left, and I explained to Eric that I thought it was him in the woods, and his eyes got very wide and he said, "Are you telling me that that wasn't one of the staff members?" So we both ran back to the main road. I was serving as a fireman for my nation's compulsory national service. Once, we were called into the forest to retrieve a body who was found hanging on a noose, deep along one of the running trails. He had apparently committed suicide by hanging himself off a tree, was found by a few morning joggers. What's creepy was, we found a straw doll at the foot of the tree. It was stabbed with a few red bobby pins in the head, facial area. And there was also an unknown talisman that was half burnt where the doll was sitting. When we took the body down, we had to carry him a few kilometers out of the forest, and halfway along the journey, a previously unnoticed wound on his face started bleeding. One of my men swore that it was bleeding from the same spot as where the bobby pin was stuck on the doll, but we could not confirm it as we left the doll where his body was found, for the police. Passed the body to the paramedics and booked our way out of the area. Edit, wow, thank you for the upvotes and the award. Glad that everyone enjoyed the story. Yes, this happened in Southeast Asia, where almost all religion exists here. Actually, I don't work in remote places, but when my father was sent to Alwar, Rajasthan for archaeological study, I encountered a very strange thing. Our house was near a small forest. One morning I saw a group of blue bulls, a kind of Asian antelope. They were 5 in number, and they were running in circles around a skull for like 30 minutes, and then one of them took it into the forest and they all followed him silently. It was such a weirdo sight, it still gives me creeps. I used to do agricultural work, alone in a field for 10 hours a day kinda thing. The pure amount of times I heard the sound of running and snapped up to see literally nothing there was horrific. I was convinced it was surely animals between the trees for a while, but the weirdest moment was when I heard it loudly from a row of trees next to me and immediately ducked under to see the feet of whatever animal was running by, and there was absolutely nothing. I remember trying to stay calm and walking really fast to the toilet block and sitting in there for a good long while before I came back. I never thought I'd be so freaked out in the daytime, but there wasn't a soul nearby for quite a way, and it really amped up my imagination. In my brief stint as a rural health nurse, I was quite unnerved by how many of the families I worked with still practiced ritual animal sacrifice, even though on paper they identify as Catholic. I used to work out in the woods in Florida a lot. Creepiest thing would be this day we were working near Big Cypress, tromping through the brush all day. At the end of the day, my co-worker and I do a quick drive-through of some of the property and realize the place was absolutely infested with water moccasins. We had been unknowingly essentially walking around a giant water moccasin pit all day. That one kinda fucked me up. Merchant seaman here. Nothing particularly creepy, most of the time you're too focused on not hitting anything, getting position fixes, updating logbooks, etc. to really think about paranormal or spoopy shit. But the closest thing to creepy I've experienced recently has been a strange transmission over the radio. It started with a series of Morse code beeps followed by an accented female voice listing off random letters and numbers. To know what the fuck that was about. Edit, I should clarify, it was definitely numbers station Y, and obviously radio propagation is a thing, but this was off the Gulf of Mexico on a hot ass day. I work for a power company restoring power after a storm. Was working when a lady came up complaining that her power went out. We explained to her that's why we were there and she should have power back soon. She said, "Oh good, my son went down in the basement and now I can't find him." I went with her with a flashlight down the road to a run-down house that was partially caved in. She walked inside and I went to follow. As soon as I walked into the door, she disappeared from my sight and I called for her multiple times. No one responded, so I ran back to our work truck to call for help. A man that was living on her street called to me asking what's wrong, and I told him the situation. He looked at me with a cold stare and said a mom and her son died in that house 4 years ago. I'm still shook to this day. I do a lot of work out in the woods. Creepiest thing was finding some headless doves. I also found sticks arranged in circles and paint on the trees in the same spot. Not sure if it was part of a ritual or not, but that's what I saw. Edit, okay, lots of great points that it could have been just wildlife or cats catching the doves. That's totally possible. I've seen cats do that before too. To add some more context, the type of doves found were not native to this area. It's possible they escaped or were released and had a run-in with a hungry house cat. And the painted circle of trees and sticks nearby was coincidence. Who knows? I certainly don't know what really happened, so it's all speculation. It's still the weirdest / creepiest thing I've ever found. I used to work on a shrimp trawler. Middle of the ocean. One night, it was a very bright moon, and kinda drizzling. Long story short, I saw a rainbow in the middle of the night. It was surreal. I worked night shift at a prison for years. The one thing that really creeps you out is when a hit is put on someone in the middle of the night. Inmates code says it is kept as quiet as possible. No one says a damn word. The only thing you'll hear are grunts and moans from the victims. Then, it goes and stays silent. If you hear it happening, it's already too late to stop it. It'll be over before you pull your keys out. Occasionally, if someone needs medical attention, the first sign we got was an inmate approaching the bar saying they need to go to medical, and are usually bleeding all nonchalant. The creepy ones are where no one shows up. All you get is grunts of pain and that's it. I used to be a delivery driver, which doesn't sound very remote because it isn't. However, I did have to deliver to some pretty remote places. One time I delivered to a trailer park just barely inside our designated delivery zone, and it was very dark and poorly lit. I leave my car running and keep the headlights and inside lights on to go deliver the pizza. Upon returning to my car, I sit down in the driver's seat and look up to see a creepy old man standing less than 3 feet from my side of the car. He was just staring. It was the equivalent of a jump scare. I just started driving forward, had to do a U-turn to get out of the park. When I turned around, the man was standing in the middle of the road, so I freaked out for a second before speeding around him, only to watch him attempt to chase my car out of the trailer park. I put in my 2 weeks after that. I was a field geologist in the outback about 12 hours north of Adelaide. One day I was driving the truck and saw what looked like a flagpole sticking up in the middle of nowhere. I wasn't anywhere near a farm or anywhere else that people would be, so I decided to drive over and check it out. It was a dead dog fully impaled on a spike. Like, from butt to mouth. Took some pictures and had my boss call the cops, but for the rest of the assignment I was freaked out that some maniac was out there with me. Edit. I don't know if it was a domestic dog or a dingo or something. It was pretty well decayed when I found it. Second edit, I'm not sharing the pictures. Please stop asking. Mostly just a lot of tweaker bullshit. But, there was a time when I was hiking in a wilderness area and saw a bunch of trash bags hidden under some trees about a quarter mile off trail. About 10 miles from the nearest road. Noped out of there pretty quick. My biggest fear at work is finding a body in the woods. I was on guard duty at Camp Phoenix on the outskirts of Kabul in 2011. It's a 12-hour shift and it started at 7 p.m. Around 2 a.m., I could hear what sounded like footsteps, running all around the guard tower, promptly set my ass hairs on end, so I pull out my night vision and pray that it's some kids or something. I shit you not, there must have been 2 or 3 pairs of dogs humping each other at the same time. Edit, y'all are messed up asking for the photo. Man, who do you think I am? Of course I will. Disclaimer, most of these photos are mine, some are not, but from people in my unit. And some contain very meaningful and impactful backstories. Serious. It's all saved for work. Also, I buried the dogs in like 150 photos. So good luck, you sick bastards. Edit 2, another link due to the interest. Mongolians and the French. I'm not sure if this counts because it's a farm, but when you live on a farm you work on a farm, so I guess I'll tell it. I grew up on a farm and in high school used to mess with my friends by hiding and making them find me. One night my friend was over and we were waiting on this other guy. We see him pull up, so we take off running to hide. It's funny because they have to wander around somewhere they're unfamiliar with or go ask my parents and be told, too bad, you'll have to find her. It's like forced hide and seek. Anyway, this one night I saw my friend hide in one building while I ran for the trees. I was hiding under some bushes and heard breathing. Like human breathing. There were no animals around. It creeped me out so bad I ran out of hiding to greet my friend. I felt so uncomfortable for the rest of the night. Sometime during the night my dad heard something and went out to investigate. In the morning he discovered that one of our cows was killed and butchered. A 2-headed snake in a Congolese forest. I'm in the Navy and work on aircraft carriers. A girl sadly hung herself in one of the spaces right near where me and my shop slept. One person swore he saw her sitting in the chair as he was getting undressed one day and ran screaming out of the berthing. I waited about a week to go into the space where she hung herself, and when I did I heard the loudest screeching noise I had ever heard in my life. I quickly turned around and got the fuck out of there. The system connected to where she slept didn't work at all for the next 2 weeks or so too. The systems break a lot, so it was pretty coincidental that it happened just as she did this. I work off a secluded / wooded area here in Texas. Every now and again when I finish with a job site, I'll pop into the head office. It's the creepiest feeling at night, mostly no light, and I've seen a bobcat a couple of times. The kicker is, the walls are all glass, so when I have the light on inside, I know I'm being watched by someone or something. When I was in college I interned with the Forest Service. A lot of the time I just spent patrolling hiking trails. Right near Grandfather Mountain I thought I heard someone yelling for help, but my supervisor told me to ignore it. Apparently someone went missing in the area in the 60s and was never found, and people would hear that voice all the time. I heard it twice more after that and it always creeped me out. Redacted. Oops. Archaeologist here. We had found a rural graveyard on USFS land in the middle of some mountain foothills in Nevada, and had started recording some features of the site. We noticed there were these creepy little porcelain angel figures on top of the graves, meaning that these were not super old graves, or at least were being somewhat maintained. We didn't have enough time to finish before sundown, so we wrapped it up and headed back to the bunkhouse. When we came back Monday to finish the site, all the angels had been systematically covered by old cow patties, like someone was trying to hide them from us. That meant A. People had been watching us that Friday afternoon, unbeknownst to us. B. People didn't want us there. We called the USFS archaeologist we had been working with, and she told us to finish and leave as quickly as possible. Title reminds me of the Stairs in the Woods stories. Ugh, I wish there were more. Edit. Here's the original Nasleep thread. Edit. I feel honored to have introduced this to so many people. I don't believe in ghosts, but I did see something once that I can't explain, and I have chalked it up to a trick of the brain. I used to work at a resort deep in Algonquin Park. It was basically rustic living for super rich people. It was a half-hour drive to cell service, and an hour drive to the nearest town. I finished my late shift at about midnight, and I was walking back to my cabin. I clearly saw an elderly man with suspenders and a plaid shirt walking by me on the path. We were not allowed to speak to the guests unless they spoke to us first, so I didn't say anything to him. It was pretty dark, too. I turned around to make sure he was headed the right way to the guest cabins, and he had straight up disappeared. There was nowhere for him to go except into the thick woods, and if he had done that, I would have heard it. Very strange. My cousin was a deep water diver / welder on offshore oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. When working at night or working really deep, it is absolutely pitch dark, you can't see anything. That in itself is a little creepy. To add to the uneasiness, he said that sometimes he would be hit with a big swirl of water as if something very large, very close, just passed by him in the blackness. Now, let's take it up another notch. Sometimes he would feel something brush up against his leg or nudge him. He said his imagination would wander, and never to a good place. Totally creeped him out every time. I work a forest ranger in the States. I've seen some creepy things, but nothing like this one bear that used to stalk me and some of the other hikers in the area. It didn't act like any other bear. It would just follow you. It would try to hide in a bush or someplace elsewhere behind you. It didn't do anything. It would just follow you. Turns out it was a dude in a suit who only got caught because he attacked the wrong redneck. I worked at a Boy Scout camp for 2 years in high school as a summer gig. A requirement for the Scouts to earn their Wilderness Survival Merit Badge was for them to set up shelters among other activities. Before I was staff, the Scouts would go 12-ish miles into the woods for their night out to a place called Shelby's Dream. The stories of kids waking up screaming, talking about seeing ghosts running at them, being hung from trees, and other wild experiences. Everybody wrote those kids off. Called them crazy. Eventually there were things people couldn't explain, such as staff members waking up with scratches and cuts on their bodies. The backstory of the place is that there was a mass killing of Southern soldiers, American Civil War, and Shelby was the daughter of the Southern captain who was hung with his men. She supposedly came back to the camp to find her father and all his men hung from the trees. We stopped sending the groups to that location a few years back. One night my cabin mates and I went out there to see if the rumors were true about that place. I heard voices, cries, and screams that echoed in the forest. There's a point where you cross a bridge and, once over the bridge, the wilderness stops. The woods continue, but there's no noise from animals or insects on that side. Absolute silence. That was one of the creepiest things I've ever experienced. I worked at a state park for a few years. One day a co-worker was doing trail maintenance and a human skull rolled out of the woods onto the trail in front of him. Turns out it was a man who had been on the run from the police and was living in our woods. Evidently it was a good hiding place because they hadn't found him until then. When I worked in a kennels up the mountains, in the depths of winter it would be dark by 5 p.m. I'd be in the office finishing up some paperwork. At this stage everyone would be gone and this particular building was a bit away from the main building, car park etc. All the dogs would be sleeping by this time after a busy day. You could hear a pin drop. Sometimes I would hear heavy definite slow footsteps, so much so that I would get up, come out onto the main floor ready to explain we are now closed, but no one would be there. It used to freak me out. A couple of times, I would even check the dogs in case it was coming from a kennel, but nope, all sound asleep. I once delivered some soda to a grocery store in the middle of nowhere around 2010, like an hour from any freeway, and the manager had at least 50 pictures of Burt Reynolds pinned up in her office. Does that count? Oil field worker here. I don't think I've ever seen strange natural shit or even strange phenomena, but the weirdest shit we see is some people's dwellings out in the middle of nowhere. Some odd shit that make your skin crawl. Real deliverance type shit. I do mineral exploration in Alaska. I'm often transported by helicopter to very remote regions throughout the already very remote state. A few years ago, my field partner and I came across what seemed like a bear kill of a caribou carcass. But when we got closer it seemed odd. The only things that remained were two spines and one head. The head was arranged such that the mouth was wide open, pointing up like it was screaming towards the heavens. The eyes were cut out. Very weird. There's also been many instances of coming across old miners' buildings littered with dog skeletons or having strangely new children's clothing strewn about. I work in northern British Columbia doing bush grinding. My brother and I go in after the logging companies and grind all the leftover piles of wood into trucks to take to the mills for wood pellets. Back in February of this year we were on night shift about 3 hours from the closest town, and the few locals that lived out there warned us about a pack of timber wolves that was about 25 strong and oddly fearless. It was about 3 in the morning and we had worked our way down the block road about half a mile, and one of us needed to walk back to the pickup truck to bring it closer to fuel up the machines. Of course I drew the short straw and went for a walk. Not even halfway to the truck the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I felt like I was being watched, so I whipped my flashlight beam across the tree line and all the eyes watching me lit up. Of course I left my shotgun in the truck, and I didn't think running was a wise idea, so I kept walking swiftly while focused on the tree line, watching the eyes follow me the rest of the way back to the truck. I got to the truck fine and obviously never left it too far away again. I've had many creepy and interesting encounters in the bush, but this one was definitely one of the oh shit moments. I'm a machinist and I was working by myself in this old warehouse at night. I would see stuff moving around and I would get creeper out. This is when ghost hunters became popular. So I started to ask questions. What's your name? Can you show me that I'm not alone? Seconds later a 3/8 Allen wrench came bouncing across the shop and landed at my feet. It didn't fall off the machine, it slid. I was cutting micarta, which is like wood, and you could see the slit marks in the chips. I said thank you to the ghost, shut down and left. I never went back. I fly helicopters over power lines in remote parts of the country. I once saw what I thought was a human leg sticking out of the woods into a very small clearing in the trees. It shook me enough I went back to the LZ and got one of the ground crewmen to go back and look while I hovered as low as I could get without hitting the rotors on the trees. We get there and he says he can't see exactly what it is. We go back and grab a pair of binoculars so he can get a closer look. Turned out to be a cow. The catch was it had no skin. Like none at all. A perfect cow sans all of its skin. No animals had eaten it yet, so it was still fully intact. There were no farms around for a 50-mile radius. I still have no clue how it ended up there in the manner it was in. I still remember the fuck that's a body feeling I had when I think of this story. I don't work in a remote place, but I have a house out in the middle of nowhere that I rarely ever get to see. The town has a population of roughly 30-40 people, all of whom have acres and acres between each other. My in-laws who live nearby have been noticing at least 2 or 3 of their chickens missing every other day and assumed it was a fox, the usual. Anyway, one night myself and my wife are doing a bit of work on our fences around our land, and we hear this thrumming noise coming from the adjacent acreage, which is completely overgrown. You can't even see through it, let alone walk through it. The only way I can describe it is like a cat purring. But you know, a fucking massive cat. The entire bushland seemed to reverberate with the sound. Needless to say, we made a hasty retreat and try not to go out at night when we're there, more so than we did before due to all the undiscovered mines. I was a Comcast cable installer. I went to this very strange house. From the front, it was a very long house, ranch, like a cigar shape. I walked in the front door into a long room, with a total of 7 doors, all of which were locked. The owner must have come through one of them to let me into this main big room. On the floor on the right, was a large tube TV, the kind one might get for free from someone throwing it out, or at a Goodwill. It was sitting on the floor. No furniture in this room at all. The man said to me I was not allowed to go any further in this house, nor go into the basement to hook anything up, and that he had already hooked up the cable line in the basement up through the floor, and that all I needed to do was put in the small box and connect it. While doing this, a door opened, and there was a young boy with a very sad look on his face. His clothes were dirty, tattered, and he looked hopeless. The man quickly snapped at him to lock the door, and the boy vanished as quickly as he opened the door. Suddenly the hair on my neck stood up, and it felt like this was a trafficking/pedo situation. There was no signal over the cable wire, naturally, and I asked the man to get into the basement to check, and he adamantly refused. I explained he would have no cable, and he said fine in an angrily tone and basically threw me out. It was super creepy. Not me, but a co-worker, used to work at a piggery. She said she would always see someone in the corner of her eyes, boards would be written up like someone was checking on her sows for her, things cleaned up. Like someone was helping her. Apparently she thought she was going mad and described seeing a dude around, and the others said, oh yeah, we think that's __________. He died a while back at home. All the staff had seen him but just sort of ignored it. A buddy of mine had a mine maintenance job for a summer. The mine was in the middle of nowhere and deactivated at the time. There was just one other person, a crusty old timer, and they didn't really do anything but keep the weeds down, and make sure nothing was leaking or rusting out. It was a very low-key job. Twice a month a plane would fly in to deliver supplies. One day, about 3 months in, my friend was just walking along the river that ran near the site, and he heard what he swore was like a church choir and organ music in the distance. He was pretty sure that there was no settlement within 100 miles, but nevertheless he decided to try to find the source of the music. He wandered miles downstream following the river, but the sound never got any louder. Finally he decided to get the EFF back to camp, because he'd wandered off really far in bear-infested woods without any protection. The music faded before he got back to camp, and he realized that it was such a peculiar experience he was reluctant to mention it to his coworker in case he thought he was crazy. The following day he did mention it, and asked if there was an Indian reserve or some other settlement with a church in area. His coworker replied, "No, man. Nothing like that here, and I've been here 10 years. Looks like you're bushwhacked. You need to get out of here." He left on the next plane. I used to work for an IT company in the gaming industry whose office was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by farms and forest. One day one of the development team had come in from a walk in the forest and was visibly upset. Turns out she came across a dead fox. The thing that was concerning is that she said it was hanging from a tree and looks like it was put there on purpose. So a bit later on, a few of us went down to have a look. We came across a small clearing with the dead fox hanging there. Upon closer inspection, we realized it had been hung by its neck, with an incision from its balls to its throat and all of its insides pulled out. Felt pretty sick from that one. We got it down from the branch and chucked it into the bushes, away from the path and clearing. Still to this day we have no idea how or why it was in that state. I was on a boat sitting on anchor in a secluded bay in the early hours, in southeast Alaska a few years ago. I stepped outside for a smoke and all of a sudden I heard the most horrific sounds of a wild animal being murdered by another wild animal. It went on for probably 10 minutes, I know it's just nature but man, I can still hear that sound in my brain and it haunts me. You guys, this is my highest voted comment of all time, beating out my post of a boiled yam in r/shitty food burn. Out by the Kachimak Bay in the Cook Inlet walking on the beach in the morning alone, a ways down the beach I found a skinned head of an otter and further down the beach its skinned body, with only fur on its hands, like perfectly cut. Turns out this was a poaching for fur situation which is highly illegal, let alone heartbreaking. A friend reported it when we got back into town. My story isn't exactly what was asked for but should be good padding while this post is so new. In middle school, I worked at the school during the summer, doing general painting and helping the maintenance guys. We had to drive out to the fuck-off middle of a Floridian forest to pick up some pine lumber for the gym's new bleachers, and when we got to the mill at like 7 a.m., the whole place was locked down with police. They had found gasoline cans and pill bottles out in one of the tree farm groves, telltale signs of kids abusing substances, but supposedly the cops were there because they found human remains. I was pretty young and I don't remember anything outside of my little kid point of view, but I remember seeing streaks of dark blood running up the trunks of several pines. I've since learned from the guys I was with then that a teenager was killed by a bear after attacking it, and the blood was either from the wounded bear climbing the tree or dragging a hurt person up with it, but I'm sure many of you can agree with me that bears don't do that. And I can't see an injured bear making it up several pines in a row while bleeding that much. So, technically, I saw a creepy thing while at work in a remote area. Look up Lakeland Mill casualties or something to find it, the story of the kid's death was in the local paper. I know a forest ranger who regularly stays at these remote cabin/fire tower outposts. She'll wake up in the morning and look out the window to soak in the landscape only to see influencers posing for photos. I used to work at a summer camp. Usually the kids would go to bed by 9 p.m. at the latest, so the rest of us would just hang out around a fire or something. One night one of the kids came to the fire pit, which was about 100 yards from the cabin, saying that she was having trouble sleeping because of the noise. So I walk back with her and make sure everything is good in the cabin and come back and tell everybody to keep it down. Maybe 10 minutes later she comes back and says that she still can't fall asleep. I walk back with her again and in my head I'm thinking that she's just being restless because we aren't being loud, but anyways I make sure she's under covers and head back to the fire pit. Just as I'm about to get there I realize that I left my walkie-talkie in her room, so I head back and see that she's sitting upright in bed with the walkie-talkie in her hand. I'm thinking okay, whatever, and tell her to go to sleep. I head back to the fire pit and the guys are like, why did you say that to her? And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, we heard you on the walkie-talkie tell her that she would look better if she shaved her head. That all little girls look better with shaved heads. I never said that and nobody believed me. And it was obviously not her saying it either since it was a grown man's voice. I rushed back to check on the cabin and everything was normal. I work in environmental remediation and go to tons of abandoned buildings and remote sites. One of the creepiest places I've ever been was an abandoned electrical parts factory in PA. Wasn't remote, but the building was abandoned, gutted, and not maintained for 25 plus years. The roof was mostly gone, the ground floor collapsed into the basement, 30 feet down, and it was pitch dark in most of the building. We had to sample from inside the building, so I sat in there with just a headlamp and small lantern, which intensified the dark around me. I heard scuffling off across the building, and nearly shit my pants. I turned to look and saw nothing. I stared for a long time in silence before I got up to get a closer look. It came from a room across the building, which was absolute black with no light infiltrating in. Imagine playing Slender Man but IRL. The room had a 20-foot ceiling, and was filled floor to ceiling with mattresses. Old, wet, rotten. And out from the pile was a squad of raccoons eating some shit. I just went back to my spot and finished sampling so I could get the hell out of there. Best part? I get to go back to resample next week. LMAOO pray form. I've been locked inside a vast Gothic cathedral at night, alone inside the structure practicing the pipe organ for a forthcoming recital. During thunder and lightning storms as I sat up high in the gallery at the console, intense lightning flashes would cause the saints and other departed souls depicted in the stained glass windows to light up with such dramatic energy that it seemed as though they were about to step right out of the window and start roaming the cathedral nave. Even their stained glass jeweled eyes glowed with a fiery spirit of reality, as if they had resurrected at that very moment. Thank you for watching the video. Welcome to Reddit Wisdom. Here you will learn the wisdom of the crowd, the wisdom of Reddit. Please consider subscribing for more Reddit wisdom.